The galaxy had long since forgotten the name of the humans. To the other species, the history of Earth was a faded myth, a tale told to children to explain the birth of civilizations that had risen from its ashes. No one remembered the brutal wars, the betrayals, the suffering. All that mattered now was that the great human empire, once a thriving beacon in the galaxy, was gone. Their fleets were shattered, their colonies abandoned, and their people, slaves to the will of other empires. Earth itself was little more than a dead world, forgotten in the corner of the known universe. But the truth was far different. The humans had not been destroyed. They had been hidden, scattered across the far reaches of the galaxy, working in the shadows, waiting. They had rebuilt their strength, piecing together what they could from the remnants of their fallen empire. And now, the time had come for the greatest reclamation of all. Elliot Kane stood on the observation deck of the Aurora, gazing out at the stars beyond. The hum of the ship's engines reverberated through the deck, a constant reminder of the machine they had become. The Aurora was one of the first ships humanity had resurrected, a vessel once thought lost to history, now fully restored with the finest technology they had been able to scrounge from their exile. Elliot was the commander of this mission, and the weight of the task ahead pressed on his shoulders with every passing second. The ship's sensors pinged softly as they neared the edge of the Kroth system. The Kroth Empire, one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, had once been the ones who'd crushed humanity into obscurity. Their fleets, now an oppressive force, had driven humans to the brink of extinction, carving out their empires on the graves of Earth's colonies. The thought of it still boiled Elliot's blood. "Captain Kane," Lieutenant Sarah Reese said, approaching from behind. She was a young officer, eager and brilliant, though she had no memories of the world her ancestors had come from. She'd only heard the stories, whispered in secret, of the Earth that once was. "Yes, Lieutenant," Elliot replied, his voice steady, though inside, his mind raced with the knowledge of what was to come. "We're nearing the rendezvous point," Sarah continued. "All systems are functioning within optimal parameters. The fleet is ready." Elliot nodded, feeling the familiar twinge of excitement in his chest. There were still so many unknowns about the mission, but one thing was certain: they would not be taking any chances. The Kroth had wronged them, taken everything from them, and now it was time for humanity to return the favor. "Good. Have the others assemble in the war room. It's time to lay the final plan in motion." As Sarah left to carry out the order, Elliot turned back to the viewport. The stars seemed so distant, and yet so close, just like the revenge they had longed for. They'd been scattered, broken, forgotten. But no more. A voice crackled through his calm, cutting into his thoughts. "Captain, you're going to want to see this." Elliot stiffened. The tone was urgent, and he immediately recognized the voice. It was Major Arlo, his second in command and a veteran of the wars. Arlo had always been the pragmatic one, the steady hand. But now, there was an edge to his voice that made Elliot's heart race. "On my way," Elliot replied, moving quickly down the narrow corridor to the war room. Inside, the rest of the senior officers had already gathered around the central holographic table. Arlo stood at the head of the room, his eyes narrowed, his face tense. "What's going on?" Elliot asked, his voice low. Arlo stepped aside, and with a gesture, activated the hologram. A detailed map of the Kroth system flickered to life in the air between them, its swirling nebulae and clusters of planets highlighted in bright colors. "There," Arlo said, pointing to a small, seemingly insignificant moon on the edge of the system. "That's where we'll strike first." Elliot studied the map closely, his brow furrowing. "What's special about that moon?" "Intel just came in from our scouts," Arlo replied. "It's a secret Kroth military installation. The Kroth leadership has been moving large amounts of resources there, ships, weapons, soldiers. If we strike it, we can cripple their ability to respond quickly. The element of surprise is our only advantage." Elliot's mind raced. The Kroth would never expect them to attack such a small, unimportant target. It was the perfect place to begin their reclamation. "We launch in 2 hours," Elliot said, his voice hardening with resolve. "Prepare the fleet." As the officers began to disperse, Elliot stood still, his thoughts heavy. This was it, the moment they had waited for, the opportunity to reclaim what had been lost. The Croft would soon learn that humanity was not gone. They were coming back, and they were going to take everything. The clock was ticking. The storm was about to break. The Aurora cut through the darkness of space with a grace that belied its age. Its sleek hull, newly reinforced with scavenged technology, gleamed against the backdrop of the Croft system. Behind it, the fleet of human vessels, smaller, faster, and more agile than the massive Croft warships, followed in perfect formation. Each ship was a testament to humanity's ingenuity, their strength born of desperation and resourcefulness. Elliot stood at the helm, staring at the display as the Croft moon loomed larger in the distance. A slight tremor ran through him as the weight of the mission settled fully in his bones. This wasn't just a strike. It was the beginning of their return to power. "All systems are green, Captain," Sarah Reese said, her voice calm yet sharp as she monitored the data streaming in front of her. "Good," Elliot replied, taking a deep breath. "Keep me updated on any changes in their defenses. We can't afford to be surprised." Just as he finished speaking, a voice crackled over the comms. It was Major Arlo again, his voice tight with urgency. "Captain, we've encountered something unexpected. There's a Croft warship moving into position, heading straight for the moon. If they reach it before we do, they'll raise the alarm, and this whole thing goes to hell." Elliot's jaw clenched. The Croft were never predictable, and this was proof of just how deep their reach went. "How far?" Elliot asked, his mind working at a rapid pace. 10 minutes at best. "We won't be able to beat them there unless we accelerate," Arlo replied. Elliot's eyes darted to the map. The clock was ticking. They needed to make their move now, or the Croft would have the advantage. "Plot a course to intercept." "We'll take them head on," Elliot ordered, his voice unwavering. "All ships, prepare for battle." A low rumble filled the deck as the Aurora shifted course, its engines firing up with increased intensity. The fleet followed in tight formation, each ship synchronizing their movements, ready for the inevitable clash. The tension on the bridge was palpable. Every crew member knew the stakes. This wasn't just about the mission. This was about sending a message. Humanity had been hidden in the shadows for too long. Now, it was time to step back into the light. "Captain," Sarah called out, "we're getting a full scan of the Croft ship. It's a heavy cruiser, fully armed, with shields at maximum strength." Elliot's eyes narrowed. "Not a problem. We've got the edge in speed and maneuverability. If we can draw them away from the moon, the rest of the fleet can slip in undetected." The Aurora surged forward, and the fleet followed, cutting through the stars at breakneck speed. In the distance, the massive Croft warship came into full view. Its dark, angular form loomed menacingly against the backdrop of the moon, like a predator waiting to strike. Elliot felt a rush of adrenaline as they closed the distance. He trusted his crew, trusted their skills. But this battle would test them like never before. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Elliot ordered. "We need to keep them off balance. Sarah, take us in low and fast." The Aurora dipped into the gravity well of the moon, veering sharply to the left to avoid the Croft cruiser's heavy plasma fire. The Croft ship retaliated with a barrage of missiles, but the human ship was already dancing through the void, too quick to be caught. Elliot gritted his teeth as the ship rocked from a near miss. "Incoming torpedoes," Sarah shouted, her fingers flying over the controls. "Deploy countermeasures," Elliot barked. The Aurora shuddered as a volley of electronic countermeasures erupted, cloaking the ship in a cloud of decoy signals. For a moment, the Croft warship hesitated, its targeting systems confused. It was enough. The Aurora darted forward, closing the distance to the enemy cruiser. "Now," Elliot yelled. The Aurora unleashed its first salvo of pulse cannons. The blasts lit up the darkness of space, striking the Croft ship's shields and causing them to flicker. The Croft warship retaliated with a barrage of its own, but the Aurora was already pulling away, darting around the larger ship with agility that the enemy could not match. Elliot's heart raced as he issued orders to the rest of the fleet. Move in. All ships, focus fire on their engines. We need to disable them before they can alert reinforcements. The battle unfolded like a deadly dance. The Croth cruiser, unable to keep up with the nimble human vessels, began to falter. Explosions rocked its hull as several ships in the human fleet found their marks. The tide was turning, but Elliot knew it was far from over. We've got them. Arlo's voice echoed over the comms, filled with grim satisfaction. They're trying to retreat. Elliot watched the Croth cruiser struggle to escape, its shields flickering, engines damaged. It was a victory, but a small one. The war was only just beginning. We've delayed them, but the moon is still the priority, Elliot said, his voice cold and focused. Move in, all ships. This is only the first step. We're taking it back. As the Aurora and its fleet charged toward the moon, Elliot couldn't help but feel the weight of what they had started. This was a new chapter for humanity, one of reclamation, one of revenge. The Croth had built their empire on the graves of Earth's people. Now humanity was coming for what was theirs. The storm was no longer just a whisper. It had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The human fleet settled into an eerie silence as they neared the Croth moon. The battle with the warship had been swift and brutal, but it was only a distraction, an opening move. Now, they had to finish what they had started. The moon, a barren rock surrounded by a veil of dense asteroids, hid a dark secret beneath its surface, the Croth military base. Elliot stood at the helm of the Aurora, staring at the looming gray orb ahead. The base was well guarded, buried deep under layers of rock, with only a handful of exposed installations visible to the naked eye. But humanity had their own secret, a weapon of precision, built to pierce the defenses of any foe. Captain, Sarah's voice interrupted his thoughts, bringing him back to the present. We're picking up increased activity on the surface. Croth forces are scrambling to defend the base. It looks like they're preparing for a ground assault. Elliot's jaw tightened. They had anticipated that the Croth would retaliate, but they hadn't expected the enemy to have this much of a foothold on the moon. Still, the mission hadn't changed. Prepare the assault teams. We're going in hot, he said, his voice firm. Arlo, get the rest of the fleet into position. We can't afford a prolonged engagement. Major Arlo's voice crackled back through the comm. Roger that, Captain. Our squadrons are ready to engage. We'll keep them distracted while you make your move. Good. We'll have the ground team deployed in 20, Elliot replied, tapping a button on his console to relay orders. He turned to Sarah. Coordinate with the team on the surface. I want that base neutralized before they can launch a counteroffensive. As the Aurora descended into the moon's atmosphere, the sky above darkened with the shadows of enemy fighters. Croth ships were taking off from the surface, trying to intercept the human fleet. The Aurora began to dip lower, skimming the jagged peaks of the moon's mountainous terrain, searching for an entrance to the base. Sarah quickly worked the controls, adjusting the ship's trajectory. We've got a narrow pass ahead. It's going to be tight. Do it, Elliot said. The Aurora surged forward, threading its way through the rocky landscape, narrowly avoiding the asteroids and debris that littered the surface. Elliot's pulse quickened as the base came into view, a sprawling complex of steel and concrete, surrounded by defensive turrets and automated drones. Deploy the team, Elliot ordered. Full force. A series of heavy landing crafts disengaged from the belly of the Aurora, descending toward the surface in a flurry of engines and dust. The fleet above engaged the Croth fighters in a chaotic aerial battle, drawing the enemy's attention away from the human ground troops. For a moment, the world seemed suspended in a blur of gunfire, explosions, and the deafening roar of engines. Elliot watched the descending landing crafts through the viewport, each carrying a team of highly trained soldiers. These were humanity's finest, men and women who had been forged in the fires of war, each one a veteran of the battles that had shaped them. The assault team's mission was simple: infiltrate the base, eliminate all Croth forces, and destroy the main reactor before the enemy could regroup. Captain, we've got a lock on their defenses, Sarah said, her voice tight with concentration. The base's automated turrets are charging up. Elliot's gaze sharpened. Target their power grid. Disrupt the defenses so the teams can make their way inside. The Aurora fired a series of precision strikes from its cannons, sending blasts of energy toward the base's power supply. The explosions were followed by a series of violent tremors that shook the ground. The base's turrets went dark, and the drone patrols ceased their sweeps, momentarily disabled by the attack. Assault teams, move out, Elliot ordered, his voice crackling over the comms to the ground troops. We're with you all the way. The ground teams leapt from their landing crafts, their boots thudding against the moon's cracked surface. They were greeted by the cold, sterile silence of the Croth installation, broken only by the distant hum of the remaining defense systems. Major Arlo's voice came through the comm, steady and commanding. We've secured the perimeter, Captain. The base's interior is a maze, but we've got eyes on the reactor. ETA to core breach, 5 minutes. Elliot's grip tightened around the console. Make sure they don't activate any of their fail-safes. We can't let them lock the core down. The minutes stretched like hours as the assault team advanced deeper into the base, using advanced tools to disable locks and bypass security systems. The Croth had anticipated this attack, but humanity was always a step ahead. Every movement, every tactic, was planned down to the smallest detail. Then, the comms came alive with a crackling voice, one laced with static. Captain, Arlo's voice was tense. We've hit a problem. The reactor's not just a power source, it's a military-grade facility. There's something else here, something they've been hiding. Suddenly, the line went dead. Elliot's heart skipped a beat. Arlo? Arlo, come in. Nothing. The silence stretched as the crew waited, anxiety thick in the air. Then, the ground shook violently, the comm system sparking to life with a warning. Reactor breach imminent. Core instability detected. A cold dread settled in Elliot's chest. Whatever Arlo and his team had found, it was something far worse than they had expected. The Croth weren't just hiding military secrets on this moon. They were hiding something much more dangerous. All units fall back, Elliot shouted, his voice sharp with panic. Abort the mission now. But as he turned to issue the order, a massive explosion ripped through the comm system, and the moon's surface trembled once again, signaling the arrival of something far more terrifying than any of them had anticipated. The base's interior shook violently as the explosion reverberated through the moon's crust. Elliot's pulse quickened. The reactor had been triggered, whether accidentally or by design, he couldn't tell. The very ground beneath him felt like it was going to split apart. Captain, Sarah shouted, her voice rising above the chaos on the bridge. The moon's core is destabilizing. If the reactor goes critical, we'll lose everything, our fleet, the surface, and any chance of keeping control of this system. Elliot's mind raced. They couldn't let the reactor go critical. It would be a cataclysmic loss, more than just a military defeat. It would be a political disaster, a statement to the entire galaxy that humanity was still fragile, that they could be wiped out just as easily as they had been before. Major Arlo respond. Elliot barked into the comm, the seconds stretched into eternity. No response. The lights on the Aurora flickered, the ship's systems beginning to strain under the mounting pressure. The air was heavy with the scent of burning circuits and the sharp taste of ozone. Captain, we've lost contact with the surface team, Sarah said, her face taut with concern. Something's wrong down there. It's as if they're being jammed. Elliot's stomach sank. Jammed? By who? Unclear, Sarah replied. But there's an interference field emanating from the core itself, powerful enough to knock out our signals. The ship shook again, this time more violently. A deep, guttural growl of unseen engines echoed from the depths of the moon, reverberating through the hull of the Aurora. Sarah's fingers flew across the console, her eyes wide with growing dread. Captain, we're not alone. A strange, shifting presence began to materialize on the edges of their sensors, almost invisible to the human eye, but detectable by the ship's advanced scanning systems. The readings were bizarre, fluctuating wildly. There were faint energy signatures that didn't match anything in the known galaxy. Who the hell is that? Elliot muttered under his breath, his mind racing. He had faced countless threats over the years: Croth warlords, marauding alien fleets, ancient weapons of mass destruction. But this felt different. This wasn't just another enemy. This isn't Croth, Sarah confirmed. Whatever's down there, it's not ours. Before Elliot could respond, a series of alarms blared on the bridge. The strange energy signatures were growing in intensity, expanding outward from the moon's core. It was as if something or someone was awakening deep within the base. All hands brace for impact. Elliot shouted, the urgency in his voice rising. Suddenly, the communication channel that had gone silent with Major Arlo crackled back to life. But it wasn't Arlo. The voice was low and distorted, as though transmitted through ancient, broken systems. Leave now, or die like the rest, the voice hissed, reverberating in the comms. The galaxy is mine. Elliot's heart pounded in his chest. The voice was not Croth. It wasn't even human. It was something older, something more terrifying. His mind flashed to ancient tales, stories that no one dared to believe, of ancient species that predated the known galaxy. Beings who once ruled all, only to vanish into myth. What is this? Elliot muttered, the reality of the situation starting to settle into place. Sarah's voice broke through his thoughts. Captain, whatever's down there, it's active now. The interference is increasing. There's no way to make contact with our ground forces. And there's a massive ship. Her words were cut short as a deep rumble echoed from the surface. In an instant, the Aurora shook violently, throwing the crew members off balance. The sensors screamed in warning as a massive energy burst shot up from the moon's surface, tearing through the atmosphere with a blinding flash. The blast was unlike anything Elliot had ever seen, a pulse of power that seemed to defy the very laws of physics. Shield up, Elliot shouted, even though he knew it was a futile order. The energy struck the Aurora head-on. The ship groaned as it was thrown violently to the side, sparks flying from exposed conduits, alarms ringing across every station. The crew gritted their teeth, holding on as best as they could. Captain, Sarah cried, we're losing control of the ship's systems. The hull's integrity is compromised. Get us out of here, Elliot roared, his eyes locked on the chaos unfolding before him. Now, full reverse. But the Aurora wasn't responding. The systems were fried, and the moon's strange, ancient energy field was overpowering their controls. In the distance, another massive pulse shot up from the surface, this time with an eerie, jagged trail, as if something was emerging from the depths below. Elliot's breath caught in his throat as the silhouette of a ship began to form from the ether, a massive, looming shadow that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. It was enormous, an alien craft unlike anything he had ever encountered. Its surface was covered in ancient, runic symbols, and it pulsed with dark energy. What in God's name is that? Sarah whispered, her voice trembling with awe and terror. That is our enemy, Elliot said, his mind racing. We've woken something ancient, something that's been waiting to return. And as the massive, otherworldly ship broke free from its hiding place beneath the moon, it became clear that this wasn't just a battle for the Croft Moon. Humanity had just found itself standing in the way of an ancient force, a force that had been dormant for millennia, and it would stop at nothing to reclaim what it had lost. The vast, alien ship loomed before them, its twisted, jagged silhouette cutting through the shattered atmosphere of the moon. It shimmered with an eerie, otherworldly glow, its surface pulsing like the heartbeat of a living creature. The energy emanating from it was beyond anything human technology could comprehend. It wasn't just a ship, it was a weapon, a force of nature, something born from the darkest corners of the universe. Captain, we need to get out of here, now, Sarah shouted, her hands working desperately at the controls as the Aurora shook once more. Elliot felt the cold weight of realization settle on his chest. They had thought the Croft were the threat. They had prepared to fight for their place in the galaxy, to reclaim what had been stolen from them. But this was something else entirely. This was ancient, primordial power, something that had been forgotten by time itself. The comm system crackled to life again, but this time it was not the Croth or even Major Arlo's voice. The distorted, chilling voice from earlier returned, as if it had been waiting, anticipating the humans' every move. "Foolish children," the voice rasped, its tone a cold echo from the void. "You thought you could take what was never yours. Now you will witness the true power of the first ones." Elliot's grip tightened on the armrest as his mind raced. The Aurora was crippled. Their fleet was scattered. Their ground forces were isolated, their fate uncertain. And now they faced an ancient power that had been slumbering beneath the moon for millennia. They were outclassed, outmatched, and yet there was still hope. He looked out toward the enormous alien vessel, now fully visible in all its terrifying grandeur. It was moving toward them, its form shifting in and out of perception, as if it wasn't entirely bound by the rules of reality. The energy pulses grew stronger with every passing second, tearing at the very fabric of space. "Captain," Sarah said, her voice trembling but still resolute, "I've got an idea, but it's going to take everything we've got. We can't fight it head-on, not with the Aurora in this condition." Elliot's mind began to process her words, quickly calculating the risks. "What are you proposing?" Sarah's eyes locked with his, determination and fear warring within them. "The base. The core. It's still unstable. If we can make it to the surface, we can trigger a controlled overload from the Aurora. The energy it would release might disrupt their ship, just enough for us to escape or destroy it." Elliot's heart pounded as he considered the plan. It was a desperate move. A suicide run, really. But it was their only shot. If they didn't act now, they would be wiped out without even a chance to strike back. "Do it," Elliot said, his voice low and grim. "Prepare the engines. Get us to that core, Sarah. If this is going to end, it's on our terms." Sarah's fingers flew across the console as she rerouted the ship's remaining power toward the engines, bypassing critical systems to increase speed. The Aurora lurched forward, its hull groaning under the strain as they rocketed toward the moon's surface. The alien ship followed, its weapons charging with a terrifying intensity. The first shot came in the blink of an eye, an overwhelming pulse of energy that tore through space, slamming into the Aurora and sending the ship into a spiraling descent. The bridge shook violently, alarms blaring, lights flickering. "Sarah, we're not going to make it," Elliot shouted, panic rising in his chest as he struggled to keep a seat. The alien vessel was closing in, its intent unmistakable. "Trust me, Captain," Sarah yelled back, her face pale but focused. "I've got one more trick up my sleeve." As the Aurora hurtled toward the surface, the moon's vast, cracked landscape racing up to meet them, Sarah pulled the final lever. A surge of power shot through the ship, and for a brief moment, the energy was almost too much to bear. The Aurora shot toward the core with explosive speed, just as the alien ship loomed over them, preparing for its final strike. "Sarah," Elliot shouted, "brace for impact." The ship's engines flared as they plunged into the heart of the base. The massive reactor below them thrummed to life, its core flickering dangerously as the alien ship above unleashed a final, devastating beam of energy. The pulse struck the Aurora with a force that should have shattered the ship entirely, but instead, something incredible happened. The overload Sarah had triggered in the ship's engines combined with the unstable energy from the reactor, creating an explosion of light and sound that was beyond comprehension. The Aurora disappeared into the storm of energy as the alien vessel's own shields buckled under the onslaught. For a brief, heart-stopping moment, everything seemed to stop. The moon, the ship, the galaxy itself, all held in an instant of perfect stillness. Then, with a deafening roar, the explosion tore through the base, shattering the alien ship into fragments. The blast wave radiated out in every direction, sending shockwaves through the atmosphere, shaking the very ground. The alien presence, once so certain, so oppressive, vanished in an instant. Elliot blinked through the blinding light, his ears ringing with the aftershock. Slowly, as the chaos began to subside, he realized the Aurora had survived. Barely. The ship groaned, its systems failing in every direction, but it was still intact, alive for now. "Captain." Sarah's voice came through the fog of exhaustion, weak but steady. We did it." Elliot stood shakily, his legs unsteady, his mind still reeling from the destruction. We survived," he muttered. He could hardly believe it. They had fought an ancient enemy, faced a force that no one could have predicted, and they had come out alive. But as the debris of the destroyed alien ship floated in space, and the remnants of the Croth base slowly crumbled, Elliot couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. They had won this battle. Yes, but the galaxy was still full of unknowns. The Croth had been only a part of the greater picture. The first ones had returned, and their plans had only just begun. "Get the fleet back into formation," Elliot said, his voice resolute. "We need to regroup, and we need answers." Sarah nodded, her face grim. "Understood, Captain." The fight for humanity's place in the galaxy was far from over. But for the first time in a long while, Elliot felt the weight of hope pressing down on him. The galaxy had forgotten them once, but now humanity would remind it that they were never truly gone. And next time, they wouldn't be fighting alone.